Vigyan Bhairava Tantra, the awakening of Kundalini and the solution to the hard problem of consciousness. And before I start, many people have asked me what sources do I use to do these sutras and these meditations, and the answer is many. And in this particular case, Vigyan Bhairava Tantra, innumerable sources, but I should also say that once I read the verse, I sometimes modify it because it seems arcane or too obscure, etc. So I modify the verse. Then I do what I think is my own commentary, just riffing through a stream of consciousness. And as I explore the sutra, I also deviate from it. So any scholars looking at these posts might have objections because they would legitimately say these are not the scholarly academic interpretations of these sutras. So I just wanted to tell you that, and it's fine. If people disagree or criticize or think this is a deviation from the original teaching, so be it. I'm only exploring fundamental reality, and I look at every possible source to see if it gives me any ideas, and then I share them with you. They may or may not be right, but here we go. So today's sutra is about generating the light of the crown chakra and awakening and the Kundalini, the energy, the spiritual energy in our nervous system. So I'll just take you through a very short meditation, then we'll go deeper. Okay, so sit quietly, observe your breath, and bring your awareness to the interior of the cranium. So in the interior of the cranium, right in the middle, and fill it with the light of awareness. And if you want, you can imagine a golden light of awareness filling the entire cranium. You don't really have to imagine a light, you just have to bring awareness. But in what we call tantric rituals, there are many means that we employ or that are employed. They are called upaya. And the correct pronunciation, of course, of Tantra is Tantra, which means ritual. And then there's mantra, which is the process sometimes of transcendence. And then there is yantra, which is visual. And there are formal yantras that represent the various aspects of awareness as it assumes form and phenomena. So mantra, tantra, and yantra are the means to awakening of our being, awakening of awareness. And so that's just a little explanation of the various rituals or upayas. So once again, sit quietly, observe the breath, bring your awareness to the interior of the cranium, fill it with the light of awareness, and if you want, you can visualize a golden light, okay, shimmering, and slowly, now here is the innovation part. So slowly let this light in the cranium shimmer and dissolve and become transparent as space, empty as space. And now fill it with the universe, fill it with stars and galaxies and moon and sky and starscapes and whatever else you want to imagine as the universe. Fill it. Sky, stars, moon, galaxies. Now, many people who are actually neuroscientists and also cosmologists do kind of suggest occasionally that our brain is actually a holographic representation of the universe, or the other way around. The universe is a holographic representation of the brain. Human brain, I presume, not reptilian brain or whatever else species brain. So we have 100 billion neurons, and there's at least 100 billion stars in a galaxy, and this brain looks like that on certain pictures, etc., etc. And that's all very well, but all I want to say is that too is an appearance, okay? That too is an appearance, and it is not fundamental reality. That's the view that is scientific, and it's based on what I've called before naive realism. Naive realism makes the following assumptions. Number one, matter as fundamental reality, or matter as the ontological primitive. Number one. Number two, subject-object split, artificial, not really real. And number three, the idea that the appearance of the world as we experience it is the world, and that the human experience, perceptual experience of the world is the real look of it. That the other species, they may have a different perceptual activity, giving rise to a different appearance of the universe, but the real universe is what it looks like to human beings through the human nervous system. So these are very big assumptions, and none of them actually, if you deeply examine them, holds any real validation. They're good assumptions, and what they help us with is they help us extend our range of experience of form and phenomena, which we call the material world. But as I've said in MetaHuman and other places, what we experience as the world, the physical world, is a virtual reality, a VR. And your body and your mind is part of the VR. And moreover, the VR is not static, it's moving, it's evolving. And so the universe appears different every time it's examined, slightly different. And over billions of years, very different. And so does your body appear different. And so does your mind evolve into different modes of knowing and experience. But all that, the body, mind, and universe, the appearance, the form, the phenomena, the mental constructs, they all actually are projections of consciousness appearing as that, as this, as all that, and everything that we call experience. So let's go a little deeper. Now you've looked at the cranium, filled it with transparent nothingness, and then actually transformed the nothingness into the whole universe in here and out there. And there's a boundary. The boundary is the skin that separates this universe from that universe. Now look at this even intellectually, scientifically, from a slightly different perspective. This is made of atoms and molecules and held together by electromagnetic fields, gravity, so on. Although here electromagnetic activity dominates this. But all this is also made of atoms and molecules and particles. The same force fields, gravity, although gravity dominates there much more than in here. But that's neither here or there, metaphorically and literally speaking. Bottom line is this is made of the same stuff, if you want to call it, as everything else that we call the universe. The same stuff, atoms, molecules, force fields, gravity, particles, waves of probability in mathematical space. So there's no difference really between this and all this. But there seems to be a boundary. And now look at the boundary. The boundary is your skull, your body, and your cranium, and the rest of your body. But what's the boundary made of? The boundary is also made of atoms, molecules, particles, waves of probability in mathematical space. So even the boundary is made of the same stuff as what's inside the boundary and outside the boundary. And so actually, in the deeper reality, when we get to the level of the quantum body, which by the way is my next book with the quantum physicist, when you get to the level of the quantum body, then this and all this is one field. And the boundary itself is artificial. It is an appearance, just like everything else is an appearance. But in the deeper reality, there's no boundary between this and that. How does the boundary get created? The boundary gets created through perceptual activity and then the interpretation of that perceptual activity. Because the boundary between one object and another object is actually color. And color gives rise to form, and form gives rise to appearance. And ultimately, even that form is a phenomenon, which is the impermanent appearance of virtual particles as that are popping in and out from the quantum vacuum as determined by the uncertainty principle. As John Wheeler said, the boundary of a boundary is boundless. Words to that effect. In other words, there are no boundaries, and we are, all of us, even this entity called Deepak Chopra, this transforming body-mind, this evolving body-mind, has no boundaries. It's a particular pattern of behavior of the universe looking at itself through this, but looking at itself, and in a very unique way. So that basically is where science takes us. But then science cannot explain right now why we have the appearance of form and phenomena, why we experience qualia such as hardness, softness, color, form, sound, taste, smell, thought, feelings, emotions, qualities of experience. Science cannot explain why we experience those, because if everything is nothing, how does nothing become hard? How does nothing become a color or a form? How does nothing become a taste? How does nothing become an idea or a thought or an image, imagination? And I have said many times, and I want to say it again, that these questions will never be asked if we have the wrong questions and we make the wrong presumptions. What we call matter is a human idea and a human experience based on perceptual activity through the conditioned human mind. And that perceptual activity is actually an activity of consciousness itself, as it knows itself through the generation of qualia, and then also conceives the subject-object split and the notion of matter and force fields and atoms and molecules and gravity. All these things that I mentioned are human constructs for modes of knowing and experience through the conditioned human mind, which is generating, modifying, and appearing as qualia, qualities of experience. And I've mentioned them. And the most dominant way we experience that is through the five senses. But then there are subtle five senses, and all of this is filtered, not through witnessing awareness, but definitely through the mind, the ego, the intellect, the five subtle senses, the five gross senses, and then the projection of that is the five elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. And then in the end, a construction of what we call the universe. But then we go on. Our telescopes tell us 2 trillion galaxies, 706 trillion stars, uncountable trillions of planets. And here is the mind-boggling conclusion. All of that, the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the rocks, the trees, the bugs, the bees, the rodents, the animals, all of that is a projection, a superimposition of nothingness knowing itself as all this. But that nothingness is the field of awareness, and it also knows that it is the field of awareness. It is the field, it is the knower of the field as well. Why do we endlessly discuss this, and why these rituals, tantric rituals, can help us go beyond these constructs and these very convenient hallucinations, this very amazing virtual reality experience, which we're now extending through AI and Web3 and virtual reality. So why is it important to know that, especially now that, we are talking about artificial intelligence? And before I started this video, I was watching the news, and they said that 43% of CEOs believe that artificial intelligence could lead to our extinction. Okay, so how do we actually prevent that, if we can prevent that? And the only way we can prevent that is through actually waking up to fundamental reality, going beyond the subject-object split, going beyond the conditioned separate mind, and understanding that this dreamscape with the avatars, including Deepak and whoever else is listening or not listening, these are all part of the fictional dreamscape that we are collectively entangled in. When we look at stars and look at galaxies, when we look at the moon and sky, what we're actually experiencing in reality is our perceptions: sound, touch, sight, taste, smell. But we're also experiencing, the effects of that: colors, sounds, textures, tastes, smells, hardness, softness, forms, phenomena. We're experiencing that, and we are embedded in that as avatars, and then we take that as reality, and each avatar feels separate from the other avatar. So then we go on to create all kinds of problems: war and terrorism and eco-destruction and extinctions of species, and climate change and social economic injustice and nuclear weapons and cyber warfare and problems in the food chain. And if this continues and AI accelerates this idea of the separate self, then we are certainly heading to extinction. The only way to wake up is through understanding our true self, which is awareness, and which is non-local, and which is cosmic, and which has all experiences entangled within it. So what we experience is these dreamscapes, these starscapes, these galaxies, these universes. They're all actually an interpretation of sensations, sense perceptions, images, feelings, and thoughts that are generated within us, by us, conceived by us, governed by us, and coming into existence and experience in us. And that us is one non-local being, call it the singularity or whatever, that's differentiating into these innumerable knowers, modes of knowing, and all things known. And that each knower is entangled with all knowers. Each mode of knowing is entangled with all modes of knowing, and that then the amazing dreamscapes that emerge are all entangled as the dream of that one singularity, field of consciousness, knowing itself in infinite forms and phenomena. But when we actually settle into this experience and have the experiential knowledge of this experience, then we become incapable of hurting or even being hurt, because that which is hurt is also part of the fictional drama, melodrama. So we need to wake up to this, and we need to understand that artificial intelligence can only extend the dreamscape. It can generate images, it can generate even what we call qualia, but it cannot experience qualia. Okay, it cannot experience qualia. It cannot experience anything that we call fundamental experience, which is all our thoughts, all our constructs, all our fears, all our agony, all our ecstasy, all our dreams, all our existential dilemmas, all our subjective experiences. AI will never be able to have a subjective experience. It's a computational device extending the range of VR. But if we just stick to this one point, that AI is never going to be conscious, only consciousness can be conscious, and AI is also an extension, a production of consciousness, extending the VR, only then. And also only when we realize that this consciousness is one, then we can create a new paradigm and actually use AI to help create a critical mass of awakening for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. So from this very simple meditation, tantric practice of generating the light of the crown chakra, which it has been said in Tantra contains the light of 1,000 suns and more. Through that, we can delve a little deeper towards healing, ultimate healing, the return of the memory of wholeness. When we are whole, we are holy, we are sacred, and we are healed. More to come.